And so in terms of my scientific thinking, it's about data. You measure how long does it take to pre-pack a gift, how long does it take to dispatch a gift, and you try and optimize that. So you look at the gifts that sell the most are close to the station. We have stations separated by gift type, so the alcohol station is close to where all the alcohol is stored, and it's next to the items that we expect to sell the most, and the items that we are only expecting to sell a few, they're a little bit further away because the operator's not having to go there very often.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Chain Reaction Podcast. We talk about everything logistics, and today we have Johannes Kloess, who is the operational head of Thortful and of Thortful business. And this is quite an interesting. He operates on quite an interesting juncture of the scientific thinking and the operational head. And I had a liberty of looking at your LinkedIn profile, Johannes. So first of all, welcome. And it's quite an interesting career you had. You are you by trade, you are trained a microbiologist, and you started kind of in that space, and now you're head of operations of that business. So can you that must be a fascinating story behind it. Please, can you tell us?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. Yeah, so as a relatively young boy, surprisingly, I somehow find bacteria and viruses very interesting through biology lessons at school. And at that time decided that this is sort of where I wanted to be, and always had in mind that I was going to be a scientist and cure illnesses or create vaccines. And so I then studied microbiology with a speciality of virology at university, did a master's degree, and then worked for 3 years in the lab researching the flu virus and vaccine. And so, yeah, very relevant at the moment with the flu season kicking off. And obviously when COVID happened, I was sort of the in-house virologist and could sort of try and recommend to people how they should behave when they were showing symptoms, or when to stay at home and when to come to work. So yeah, I worked there for 3 years, had a really interesting project that I was working on, and what I think, quite high impact in that we was sort of part of the decision of what the vaccine was going to be. So that gets sort of looked at every 6 months, depending on the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere. And then they guess not guess technically, but they sort of have to make a decision on what is likely to be the most effective vaccine. And we were part of that. So yeah, quite impactful. After 3 years, I sort of wasn't quite sure whether this was actually where I wanted to be. And I felt like, sort of working felt like government to some extent, didn't have enough pressures, challenges. There was no sort of commercial element to it. And being a sports person, I liked that sort of edge of trying to compete and trying to do things better, and finding ways of winning to some extent. And so I decided to leave science behind and sort of found myself in a operations role at a fashion startup that had just been founded. And that's kind of how I got into this space, sort of all through learning, asking others, common sense, lots of trialing and testing, which is kind of like sort of, where the scientific knowledge and education sort of is still useful these days. Constantly reiterating, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then going from there.
Interesting. This is, I mean, you just adding to the majority of the colleagues that I've ever spoken with that fell into operations and kind of logistics pretty much by accident. So it's only very few that I can recall. It was by trade. So Thortful. So this is it's a kind of it's a greetings cards business and gifts business. So, and the operations are quite a challenging environment there. I'm sure there's a lot of firefighting going on. So can you tell us a little bit, because that's a fascinating thing. It's the textbook definition of highly seasonal and massively kind of the spiky business. So can you talk a little bit about that?
That's correct. Yeah. So we're an online card retailer. technically a marketplace in that we have about 4 to 5,000 creators who design our cards. We then show those cards to our customers. There's about 60, 70,000 cards live on the site at any one time. And so subject to what card or occasion you're buying a card for, you then hopefully find a card that is suitable to your needs. Outside cards, we also sell small gifts, chocolates, sweets, larger gifts like alcohol, beer, mugs, and so on and so forth, as well as flowers and plants. So quite a range of different products. In terms of our seasonal peak, so most people think Christmas is the busiest time of year for us. And while it is a significant greeting card giving period, we don't actually see Christmas as a peak because it sort of gradually builds. A lot of people are very well organized, start buying their Christmas cards months ahead. Everyone knows it's well publicized when Christmas is happening and no one really forgets about it, although a lot of people do leave it very late. So it is sort of 2-3 times bigger than a normal month. However, what we refer to as peaks at Thortful are Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. 2 of which happen in Q1 and 1 in Q2. So we're very much H1 focused. So we come just out of Christmas, where most people have had their peak, and everyone takes a quick break and a breath. And then we're fully into Valentine's Day and Mother's Day in February and March. And the occasions are roughly similar size. Generally more people have mothers than they have partners. So Mother's Day tends to be the slightly bigger one. And it's the one that follows very shortly after Valentine's Day. And depending on how it falls, it can be so anywhere between 3 and 5 or 6 weeks after. And so it's like you're in peak mode for the first quarter.
Well, size-wise, it's interesting because I was at a conference some time ago, and there was a business that does kind of the hamper baskets or gift baskets, and they, if I recall correctly, the numbers that they mentioned is that kind of the typical regular kind of slow week or period could be let's say 50 a day, and in a high and peak season it can get to couple of thousand a day. Is that the scale that you're seeing, and how quickly, how fast is the jump, or is it kind of slow build up as pre-Christmas kind of over a few weeks period, or is just like spike?
Yeah, it's a mixture, and so different order types have sort of slightly different profiles. Generally, we start promoting the different peaks sort of 4 to 6 weeks out. Some people will now be already thinking about buying their Valentine's Day, Mother's Day cards, but there's very, very few of those. So we see the gradual build up from 4 to 5 weeks out, and then the real peak starts happening usually the Saturday, Sunday, the week before, when people kind of start thinking about, oh, what's happening next week? And then it's like this eureka moment. Oh my God, it's Valentine's Day or Mother's Day. But then, you get people who literally remember the day before or on the day. So there's a real mix of customers, from those that are planning, very well organized, buy their cards well in advance. And then there's those that need many, many reminders to sort of explain, you better get going now or you're in trouble.
Well, this is very interesting, Johannes. But in terms of then the operational side of things, so how does that impact your operations on a daily basis or on a weekly basis with that spike? Do you guys print the cards, and how do you actually sort of operate? There's almost no, the automation must be playing a very, very big role as well. So can you talk a little bit about that physicality of the spikes in demand?
Absolutely. So we can see something like a 15% increase on what we ship daily between a non-peak period and the sort of busiest days leading up to peak, which is usually 3 or 4 days out. In terms of what that looks like in terms of producing it, we produce all our cards 100% on demand. So we don't hold any card stock. You see the 60, 70,000 cards online. You choose that card, and when that order is sent to our printers, that's when it is produced. We do obviously hold stock for gifts and flowers. They need to be ready as and when those orders come in. So in terms of the work we do day to day, it is a lot of planning. We think about peaks sort of 3 to 4 weeks, months out, thinking about what are we going to expect in terms of demand? How is that demand profile going to be different to maybe what we have seen in previous years? What sort of growth are we expecting? How is the order mix going to be different? So let's say we've been working on a new gift product or new flowers, that could then change what we've done in previous years. We try and combine all that information together and try and predict within the range what we are going to see on each individual day for each individual order type. And we then work with our partners on the shop floor to estimate how is that going to work in terms of the capacity of the machines, what manual intervention is required, and then further on with our logistics partners, how is this going to play through to them in terms of when they need to be collecting the orders, when are they expecting to process them in order to then succeed with the best possible delivery performance, because nothing is worse than customers ordering something and then not getting it when they are expecting it, especially when it's such a finite amount of time, leaving it to 2 or 3 days beforehand and needing it for a specific date, whether that's a birthday all around the year or Father's Day that happens on a specific day. So if you're not getting it before then, we've missed it, we've disappointed that customer, and there's very little we can do to rectify that. They're going to have to either find an alternative or wait for it and then let themselves and the recipient of the card down.
Very fascinating, and I actually have some experience in that space. I used to work one of my first earlier jobs was at Xerox, where I work with these big printing machines, which and this is probably something similar that you guys use. You get, it's like heavy paper gets printed and it gets inserted into an envelope, and then the label is and it goes into, essentially goes to a mailman to have it delivered. So interesting. Where is the bottleneck? Because you're talking about the forecast, and like, where does the error in a forecast hits the bottleneck of the operations, and where the lack of capacity or kind of the operational constraints are coming into play and reduce or limit your ability to deliver?
So the way that we have been set up in terms of the automation we have, in terms of the printing and the fulfillment of card-only orders, which are entirely automated, we are set up so that we have plenty of capacity. We have overcapacity even at peak. And we have that overcapacity because, on a normal day, it will take a few hours to produce those orders. And in peak, we are working around the clock, 24/7. The real bottlenecks are when the automation falls down. When a machine breaks, if the technology breaks, if, it could be AWS is down, we had that recently, it's those things. And we try and plan for those to some extent. You can never ever have, 100% output if these things happen, but we have sort of extra capacity built in, and we try and process orders as they come in. So on a normal day like today, we may hold orders back, batch them together and print them towards the end of the day because it is relatively quick to do this small amounts compared to peak. In peak, we will be printing throughout the night. We're always trying to either catch up or get ahead so that if something happens, we have as much time as possible. And we plan for things to go wrong. We know what's gone wrong in the sort of 10 years that Thortful has existed. And we think about every single one of those instances and what can we do to prevent that having a significant impact. So we have engineers on site, we have people on call throughout the night, all these sort of things, so that if something happens, we can jump on it as quickly as possible, not lose any time ideally. We have spare parts, all these sort of things. And then we also have manual ways of compensating for something that is then being delayed. So while the machine is down, we might divert orders into the hand finishing department. But obviously that speed is significantly lower, and that's only really a short-term fix. And those teams are predominantly working on all those orders that can't be automated. So that's the gifts, where the card has been printed, obviously on the big printer. And in terms of printers, you have to sort of picture the size of a printer is like a garage. You kind of know this from your experience. You take a pallet of paper and you put it into a printer, and you get a pallet of printed cards out. Like, it was quite sort of eye-opening when I first arrived at Thortful, thinking, well, how is this all going to work? And it's impressive. The technology is pretty cool.
It's industrial, absolutely, but this is the interesting point. So you did mention, it's like, well, when the automation works and it's just a card, there's quite a lot of it can be made as a seamless, no touch process. But when you need to merge it together with the gift, so how do you manage this bit? Because that's where a lot of complexity, kind of operation complexity, comes in. And I would also like to kind of maybe, how do you leverage your kind of scientific thinking in optimizing that process? Because there is lots of variables there.
Yeah. So then obviously we have to automate the card process, because, it's a low value item. It's a relatively small basket value compared to most retailers. And automation is the way to keep costs down, as well as obviously have the volume. Coming on to all the orders that sort of need manual intervention. So the way it works is the card is printed, and it is printed with all other cards that are sort of going with the gift. If we take, some chocolate, that card arrives in the hand finishing department and is scanned, and then the team understands what gift this is being sent with and to which customer, and the delivery label is printed off. Now, that is quite a time intensive process. The way we try and plan for that and make it as efficient as possible, and we do this to some extent in sort of normal, quieter times, but we do it especially at peak times, is we pre-pack the gifts as much as it's possible. So where it is possible to have this sort of gift outer packaging with the gift in and the filler, we have that pre-packed on pallets. So when that card comes and is scanned and the operator understands this goes with this chocolate, all they have to do is put that card in the box, close the box, apply the delivery note, rather than having to find the gift, make the box, put the gift in, put a bit of filler in, all that sort of stuff. So we're investing that time ahead of peak. And obviously that's reliant on good forecasting. And, the thing about forecasting, I'm sure you've heard this plenty of times, you either get lucky or you're wrong. So, again, it's all about planning, and it's all about, like, how do we have some oversupply if we're doing really well, and how do we have stock that, if we don't sell as much, we then have other ways of selling it after peak potentially. And so in terms of my scientific thinking, it's about data. You measure how long does it take to pre-pack a gift, how long does it take to dispatch a gift, and you try and optimize that. So you look at the gifts that sell the most are close to the station. We have stations separated by gift type, so the alcohol station is close to where all the alcohol is stored, and it's next to the items that we expect to sell the most, and the items that we are only expecting to sell a few, they're a little bit further away because the operator's not having to go there very often. And then you iterate and you change. So what we might sell well at Valentine's Day might not sell too well at Mother's Day or Father's Day. So then, you're constantly reviewing what is the most optimal way of doing that.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by Phlox, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit phlox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
Well, that brings us to a point of technology. I mean, we are a technology business, and obviously without the use of technology, it's very difficult to create there are no perfect forecasts, because obviously we're using past in order to predict the future, and the future is always different. But how do you leverage the technology side of things, and what does it help? Because you said that the forecasting and then those subsequent improvements are kind of how dynamic or how reactive versus proactive it is, and what is the main focal point or a point of attention for you to kind of the optimize and improve business or operations going forward?
So I think at the moment it's quite reactive. So the gifting side of the business is a relatively small amount. It makes up just over 10% of our revenue, but it's an area that is growing faster than all other areas. So as that happens over the last 2 or 3 years, the demands of space and the complexity, you know, we started off with a handful of gifts and we are now well over 100. It changes totally, and it changes seasonally. Christmas gifts are different to Valentine's Day gift, and so on and so forth. So there's a constant reiteration of what we're trying to do. But yeah, fundamentally it is relatively reactive at this stage still, but I feel like there is going to be solution in future where we can be more adaptive, proactive in terms of using all the data we have gained over the sort of 10 years of Thortful and the 4 or 5 years of having gifts to predict what is going to happen. But yeah, you're right. Ultimately, you're taking what's happened in the past to predict the future, and more often than not, you're not very far off. But it can change, and where it does change, it does then add extra complexity, or we've decided to prioritize one gift over another, and actually it's the other way around in terms of sales, and then best made plans don't work out as efficiently as you had hoped. But it's all about then learning from that, reiterating it, understanding if there was something that we could have done differently or could have forecasted differently, and taking that into the next occasion. It's never long. The benefit of having 3 peaks instead of just 1 peak is that you have the next peak very soon and you can implement what you've learned very quickly and hopefully then see the benefits.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Well, one thing that I wanted to ask you is, how do you manage kind of duality of your business? And what I mean by duality is, like, you have, let's say, if a low margin, high volume, cards only business that moves at one kind of velocity, and there's a one mindset that is like maximum automation, no touches, ideally. So it's like you press a button and the stuff goes out of the door, versus the slow, higher margin but slower velocity. Yes, you're printing, but it needs to be manually packed and inserted and checked and so forth. So you manage quality control, you manage the actual, it's like almost like a warehousing operations. You do picking and packing yourself. And obviously the cost or the price pressures as well. Sort of, yes, you want to optimize one, but it's low margin, high volume but low margin. On the gifting side of things, yeah, it's great, but it's slower, but it's a much higher margin. So how do you prioritize? How do you balance? How do you manage the trade-offs? What are the trade-offs?
I think we try and look at both. We know that we have already achieved a very high level of automation in our cards, and that doesn't necessarily cover big orders for cards. So if you're buying 20 cards, we're not automating those, but up to a level we do. So we try and not pick favorites. We want to optimize both. The gains we can make may be different in size. In terms of the gifting space, what excites me is that we have seen such nice growth over the last few years since we started selling gifts, and that is what's going to open up greater opportunities. So rather than looking at the data and the seconds it takes to pack up a gift and dispatch a gift, we are not far off automating that, and that's where the real step changes will come. But we'll have to look at how we do that, because automation works very well if it's a sort of couple options, couple sizes, rather than 100 different shapes and sizes and of gifts and 15 different types of packaging. So that's what excites me in that gifting space, and I expect us to do some significant new things in that space, because as it keeps growing, it's just going to take up more space and more time, and that's not an efficient way of growing. Ultimately, that's just just expanding. It's not necessarily scaling efficiently.
I understand, but that brings to an interesting point, is because I judging by from what you were saying, all those operations are run in house. So you have an in-house team, so you're not relying on partners that, I don't know, print for you and then fulfill and pick and pack for you. I mean, the gifting. So it's the internal operation. So how do you build resilience? How do you balance the resilience versus cost efficiency, and the scalability that of the business that needs to be? So let's say if you have your own kind of pickers and packers, let's say in low period you need 5, and in the peak period you need 50. Well, I'm just throwing numbers out, but like, how do you manage that?
Well, In fact, we are working with a partner. So, and
Right.
that's how this works. And the numbers you quoted, so 5 to 50 is not far off what we go through in peak. And so we've been working with a print specialist who does all our printing and our pick and pack. We
Mm.
have a different supplier for our flowers and plants, just because they're slightly different in terms of how orders are fulfilled. But yeah, they they are experienced in doing the scaling. Thankfully, their main peak is in Christmas, so it doesn't coincide with ours. So they'll be like focusing on a lot of their other clients for Christmas, and then during our peaks, they can focus quite a lot on us. So that's why this works really well. In terms of the technology, the printing technology, those printers aren't cheap. You know this.
Yeah.
So there will be a point in future potentially where we get to a size where it could be beneficial to bring that in house. But I think the fact that you're going to have to scale so significantly at multiple times throughout the year, it makes it really hard in terms of hiring, the planning, and to have a partner who's experienced at doing that,
Mm.
and does this regularly multiple times during the year, has worked really well for us. And we've been working with them practically since day one, and it's a real close collaboration, and it's an interesting one because it doesn't quite feel like a supplier customer relationship. It's more like a partner relationship, in that they fully understand, they believed from day one in the potential of this business, and they supported us for the first few years, where you can imagine there would be a card every few hours, mostly test orders probably, and now it's multiple cards per second. They've supported us, and they've grown their experience and expertise in that specific space with us. And
Mm.
I've got the pleasure of working with my sort of counterparts at that site, where if I have an idea to make things work better, they are open to that. But equally, they know more about printing than I do, obviously. And so they can
Right.
advise on, have you considered doing this, or could you be sending us orders at different times of the day or in different batches, so that we can process them more efficiently on our side.
It's an interesting point that since you're using partners, and both printing and kind of fulfillment and packing side of things are fairly, they kind of expertise heavy and fairly focused businesses. And it sounds like those are obviously two different companies and two different businesses that are not necessarily co-located.
They are actually, they're
Oh,
in one
they are.
one
So, okay.
place. Yeah, yeah. And actually, what we've done recently
But
is
there's
a
a different
project.
businesses. So essentially you have a kind of, you have a wall between
No,
the
they're even
cars need to go
even
through.
the same business. So the
Okay.
only two different businesses are the flowers and cars and gifts. So they are,
Okay. No, but
uh,
that's what I meant. The
oh
gifts bits.
yeah, the
Sort of
gifts are
when
next
you do.
to the card automation machines and the
Okay.
printers. They're all not directly, but they're within the same building. And one of the things we've actually done
Okay.
recently, we I think this was 2 years ago, we had a external warehouse, sort of
Right.
2 or 3 miles away from the site, and we were sort of trying to improve some of that. Both the sort of the costs of having to move products back and forth.
Mm.
I explained earlier how we pre-pack a lot of the gifts. So you'd have
Yeah.
the gifts come in, you'd pre-pack them, you then send them back to the warehouse because you can't store it all there till you need it. As well as the flexibility, like you can't just go and say, oh, can you bring it now? And then 20 minutes later, well, actually, no, send me another pallet. So we then worked with our partner, and they got some of their other customers involved in us finding a way to have a warehouse that's across the road. So now
Right.
we have the flexibility where literally someone, and like when I'm on site and I need to check something, I can just walk across the road and just say, can you get me that pallet, in theory. And that's been really nice, where we've collaborated with our print and pick and pack partner, but they've also got their other customers involved to sort of, holistically find benefits for multiple people and multiple companies.
Right. No, it's very interesting, and the co-location is obviously a critical element of this. Just making sure that you're doing kind of pre-packing and pre-peaking in one place, but you, as you said, it's across the road, that you can merge the two and get the final gift being sent out. I'm sure that being an internet-based business, you are not operating in the UK alone. So
Well,
how
we
do you
are.
deal with oh, right, okay. So
So in terms of
okay.
in terms of our production and fulfillment, it's all from the UK.
It's
We
from
do
the
obviously,
UK, but if
yeah,
I'm in France, can I order from you?
absolutely. You can
That,
any
that, that
country in the world theoretically can order from us. It will obviously take time because we are producing in the UK, and international post is a challenge. And yeah, there's sort of even less predictable, I'd say, than sort of the
yeah.
UK mail.
But that's what I meant is like how big a proportion of your business is international business, and how do you cope with that one?
So
Or is just an
unf
occasional and accidental?
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as that maybe, but it is a small amount. I think it's just a sort of low single digit percentage of our overall sales, partially because the customs regulation are sort of more tricky. The larger and higher value the orders are. So we basically only send letters and cards. And I think the other thing is that our content, and that's kind of what makes Thoughtful so unique, that our creators create and put online, is sort of quite heavily leaning on the British humour. So the people you see buying internationally are usually people who've sort of lived in the UK and have moved abroad, or they're sending to friends and family who have moved abroad and sort of like understand that British humour. I think we have been thinking about expanding internationally, and to really give ourselves the best shot, we probably would need to have slightly different content, probably look at producing closer to the customers for the speed. So you can imagine something happens in the world. It may be a TV show, Traitors, for example, at the moment. Something happens. There could be a card online being sold within 12 hours. That order could be dispatched a few hours later, and the next day it's delivered. It's that speed that really our customers value. Like they will see something, they can have it quite quickly, obviously subject to how quickly it's delivered. And that's sort of outside our control to some extent, but we work very closely with our logistics partners to try and optimize where we can and give customers the choice that they need. So I mentioned earlier, there's some people who, beginning of the month, plan the whole next 6 weeks, all the birthdays, buy 5 or 6 cards. They're not in a rush, so they can choose a relatively slow delivery speed. And then there's lots of people who literally, realize with minutes to go before the order cut off that I need this card tomorrow, and it mustn't be late. And everything in between.
Yeah, that's what the comedians are joking about. Men, it's
Yeah.
like walking into a shop 5 minutes before it closes, saying that, well, it's Christmas tomorrow. What gifts do you have for
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, no, we definitely have lots of those, and we've got plenty of men, I'm sure, who are having their cards bought for by their partners. So yeah.
No, it's a fascinating business, and a lot of very specific, also relatable kind of the challenges that you guys are facing. But if kind of looking forward, or looking at your current problems, or looking forward in terms of where you want to go, and if you had a magic wand and you can have one wish kind of granted, or one thing that you can do, change, either have or build or improve or remove, what would that be?
This is a really difficult one. But I think I'm sort of like thinking about sustainability, but also everything else we do in the business. It sometimes feels like we're all individually trying to solve our challenges. And when we start talking together and when we collaborate, we realize that a lot of us have the same challenges. And so it feels like there must be a way for us to collaborate more and more easily, so that we can spend less time doing it individually and less time individually and more time working together and actually achieving more and more quickly. Whether that's on optimizing how we move goods, or utilize empty spaces, or procure things more efficiently, like make ourselves more sustainable, work with our suppliers. It's all those sort of things. I know it's a very big wish probably, but yeah, ultimately us to collaborate more and worry less about, oh, well, I need to figure this out myself, and, we're all competitors. Well, yes, we are, but for some of the bigger things, we probably need to forget that and think about achieving the goals we have more efficiently.
It is a beautiful thought, and it's exactly the same kind of the mindset that we have as well. Is the collaboration is what's going to be able to kind of move us forward globally, as a kind of from an operational point of view. Because if we try to optimize just for ourselves within the four walls of our business, we can only achieve only so much. But then working with your customers, working with your suppliers, working with your partners, that you can actually help each other, and both will get better. And that's where I have a double meaning for the word of sustainability, which is one is the green side of things, and the other one is sustainable, to have a sustainable growth and platform and the ability to operate. Fascinating. Thank you, Johannes, for being a guest on the podcast. It was very, very interesting discussion, and I look forward to buying maybe some products from you. And I'm sure actually my family have done that before. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have a story or insights to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to us through the links in the description. See you next time.